Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to my tutorial on buttons. I have created a button API. It's not the best API in the world. I need to preface this. Like, it's kind of served my purposes. It could probably be done a lot better. It could probably work a lot easier. But I mean, it does what I need it to do for now. It's not like anything official or anything. So don't, I'm sure there's, better ways to do some things, and there's probably a lot more functionality that could be added. And I'm sure at some point it will be added. But I do use this thing every now and then. Pretty much anytime I want to do something with touchscreen monitors, I found that the button API that I've set up here works pretty well for creating nice little buttons that look nice and behave pretty well. Part of what the button API does is number one, it creates buttons on the screen. It basically allows you to have red and green. It allows you to center the text on the buttons automatically. A couple cool things. So I just wanted to show you how the button API works and allow you to use it in your programs. And before we even get started, I'll paste bin put button right there. You go. So you can go ahead and check it out if you want. Feel free to download the paste bin. You can see the code right there for you to go grab if you want. So without further ado, how about I start walking through the code of how the button API works. Alright, very simple. The first thing we do is define a variable called mon, which stands for monitor, and it's wrapped up to the peripheral on top. There you go. So, that's assuming that the computer is underneath the monitor. Now, if your computer's on the other side, like on the right side or behind it or something, feel free to change this from top to back or whatever you need to. It also sets the text scale to 1 to make sure it's the right text scale, not too big of a font, and it'll also set the text color to be white. Pretty important there as well. And then finally, you can see it defines an array called button, and it sets the background color of the monitor to black. Pretty important stuff right there just to get started. So the first time button is called, it's going to go ahead and do that. Now there's several functions in here. A new one that I added just recently is called clear table, and it completely clears out all the information stored in that button table that we had right there. Just reinitializes that button. That's if you want to erase all the buttons you have and have like a second menu, which you guys might have seen me do on my portals thing. I had to add that clear button so that I could have, once you click on one button, it gives you a new menu of items to deal with. All right, so that's what clear table is about. Now, the biggest and most important thing about this is set table. The table is some information that stores everything about the buttons. Okay, the most important piece of information is the name of the button. All right, so when you call the set table, you have to give it the name, the function it's going to call when it gets clicked, and the X and Y values of where the button is going to be drawn. So that's the information you have to send to set table. The first thing it does is it creates a new table inside the button table, and the index of that is going to be the name that we pass it. That might be a little confusing to you guys who aren't programmers, so let me see if I can explain it to you in a little simpler term. So in programming, you can have many dimensions of arrays. An array is just a bunch of information all tied together into one variable. Your most basic array is going to store several pieces of information like this. This might be array one variable that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots of information in it. Okay, so for position 1, we could call it dire. Okay, and position 2 could be called wolf. And position 3 could be called 20. And the way this would work in programming is shown here. So you can see we've got this variable called temp, and we're storing 3 pieces of information in it. In the first slot, we're storing the word dire. In the second slot, we're storing the word wolf. And in the third slot, we're storing the word 20. Cool? Just like that. Now, if you want to access them, you can simply say print temp1, temp2, temp3. And when we run this program, it's going to print out dire, wolf, 20. Not too shabby. Now, what I've actually created is as another dimension to this array that I'm actually storing more information here. So I've got something like this. Is cool. And then this guy also can store information, and this guy can store information. So you can say, hey, give me whatever direwolf has in this position here, or dire in this position. So dire position 1 would be is, and dire position 2 would be cool. So a little confusing, maybe, but let me show it to you in the code as well. So now we're creating another array inside the array of temp, so dire, and then the first piece of data is, and the second piece of data is cool. So just right here, dire and is cool. Okay, so that when I print dire 1 and then dire 2, I should see the words is and cool. is in cool. Perfect. So that's basically what I'm doing here in the button program. So if I edit button again, you'll see here we've got this table where we use the name of the button. So in this case, it would be test1 would be this line here. So this would be test1. And the first piece of information inside test1 is the function that gets called. That would be correspondent to here. The second piece of information is whether or not it's currently active. That would be the position here, etc., etc. So hopefully that explained two-dimensional arrays. Probably a little bit confusing, but hopefully it helped. So that's basically what we've got here. We're storing all the information about a particular button. Its function that it gets called, whether or not it's active. By default, it's always set to false in the beginning. You might want to pass that into the table, but for now I haven't been doing that. And then the X and Y position of where the button is drawn at. Okay, so if we look at an example, for example, this program that we have up on the screen right now, we'll see that the set table function is called, and we say the test1 is what we want to have written on the button. So there's the word test1. The X and Y positions of where it's at, 10 to 20 on the X and 3 to 5 on the Y. So this is 10 to 20 on the X and then 3 to 5 on the Y. So that's 3, 4, 5. Cool. All right. So that's pretty much how that works. And then again for test 2, we do 22 to 32 on the X and then 3 to 5 on the Y again. So this is 22 to 32 and then 3 to 5 on the X, or on the Y. Cool. So that should explain to you guys how those little tables work. Now the function fill table is real easy. It calls set table, button text, function name. So this is just a sample of how you would use the fill table, right? So it's whatever button text, whatever function you want to have called, and then the X and Y's. This isn't actually executed ever, but it's just a demonstration to whoever opens the program to see, oh, that's how I use the set table. All right, that makes sense. And then the function name is, what the function is called when you click on button text. So that's just demonstration code. It doesn't actually execute or do much. Okay. Now here's the real spiffy code, the fill command. The fill function is called by the screen function. So I'm going to talk to you about screen first, and then we're going to go look at fill. What screen does is it actually populates everything on the screen. So what we do here is we go through all the names and all the data that's stored in that pairs of the button. So it goes through all the buttons we have, and it gets the name of the button and all the data that's contained in the button. So that is all the way up here. We can see it is the name. So this piece of information, and all the data, which is all these lines as well, because those are all stored in an array. Okay, and what it does with that is first, it checks if the data is active on that button. And what that is, remember, is whether or not it's on or off at the moment. And if it's on, then it sets the color to be green. Otherwise, it sets the color to be red. Then it calls that fill command. What fill does is it sets the background color to be equal to the background color that we specified down here. So down here we passed it the color to set, be it green or red. It sets that color, and then it does a little bit of math to determine where it should go ahead and write out the words that it was given. So what it does here is a little bit tricky, but it takes the X and Y minimums and maximums. So what it does is it takes the Y min plus the Y max. So in this case it's 3, 5, right? And it divides by 2 after adding them. So 3 plus 5 equals 8, divided by 2 is 4. That's how it determined that it should start writing on Y level 4 for the text. So it centers the text in the button by adding these two numbers, 3 plus 5, dividing by 2, it gets the average, and it writes the text in line 4. Okay, now for the X position, it takes the X max minus the X min, and then it subtracts the length of the text and divides by 2. Okay, so in this case, what it does is, remember we were at 20 and 10. So it does 20, okay, minus the 10, gives you 10, minus the string length, which in this case is 5, divides by 2. Okay, there you go. And then it adds 1 just for good measure. Then it loops through for j is equal to the data in the y min and the y max, do the following. So basically here we're looping through y min 3 through 5. So it starts at 3. And it says set the cursor position to the x minimum, which is 10. So it sets the cursor position to the x minimum of 10 and the current j value, which is 3. So 10, 3. That sets the cursor position to the top left corner of where the button should be. Then, if you're at the spot where you should be writing text on the y line, so remember that's 4, but currently we're at 3, so we're not there. So let's just jump down here. And we're going to say for x, for this variable I is equal to x min to x max, do write out a blank space. So since we're not supposed to be writing any text on this line, okay, we're on the 3, we're just going to go from 10 to 20, and we're just going to write a space. So all spaces all across, and because the background color is red, that's what we get up there. So that's what we do on lines that don't have any text written on them, is we just write out spaces. So that way it looks like a button. Pretty neat, right? Now, if we are on the y position where there should be spaces, so next time after we finish all this, 10 through 20, and we're on y3 still, we jump down to y4. This is the y line that we're supposed to be writing text on. So let's take a look. For k is equal to 0 to the x max minus the x min minus the length of the text plus 1, do. If you're at the spot where you should be writing out the text, then write the word, the text of the button, so right there. So in this case, it comes out to be like this. It's the x max, which in this case is 20, minus the x min, which is 10, so that's a total of 10 remaining, minus the length of the string, which is 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters in test 1. So that gives you 5, plus 1 is 6. What we're doing here is we go through and we go space, 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 so that's 3 spaces, then the word test, then space, space, space. Pretty cool, right? So just a little trick of math to get the monitor to write out the text, but otherwise write out spaces. Neat. And then we set the background color back to black. So that's how we've centered the button. So regardless of what word we put on here, it should be centered in this position. So it'll automatically center whether it's 1 or 5 or 10 characters. Now if it's more characters than the length of the button, it's obviously going to look a little bit funny, but it should be all right. Toggle button is real simple. It takes the active and switches it, so it makes it not active. So if active is currently true, it returns it to false, and if it's false, it returns it to true. And then once it's done changing that, it retoggles the screen to make sure the screen gets completely refreshed with that new information. Now flash is a function that flashes the button. So it'll toggle the button, refresh the screen, wait about 0.15 seconds, then toggle the button again and refresh the screen again. And these screen refreshes aren't actually necessary because it's done up here in toggle button, but it doesn't really hurt. Check XY is the function that checks for when you click on the screen, check to find out which button you clicked on. It's done like so. For all the buttons and all their data, do the following. If the Y is greater than or equal to the Y minimum, so for example, the Y minimum is here. If I click somewhere inside this button, it's going to be greater than 3, okay? Greater than or equal to, that is. And it's less than or equal to the max. So we found out that we clicked somewhere within these two lines, somewhere between 3 and 5. But I could have clicked on this button or this button. They're both somewhere between 3 and 5, right? So the next line says narrow it down on the x. Same thing. If it's greater than or equal to the x minimum, which is this one, and it's less than or equal to the x maximum, which is here, it says you're somewhere inside this button. And if that's the case, then call the function that we told it to call and return true. That means we found something. Otherwise, return false. Now the rest of the code is pretty simple. There's the heading text, which is right here. It goes ahead and gets the size of the monitor, does a little bit more magic to figure out the center position on the x-coordinate, the length of the string, interacts with the size, and then it adds 1, and the y position is 1. So the first top line, the y position 1, it centers the text on the screen and writes out whatever text we have. And then the label function is you tell it where x and y should be, the width and the height, and the text that you want to write. And when you do that, it'll just write out some text anywhere on the screen that's not on a button. That's how I wrote the word demo right here, okay, using that label. So now that we've walked through all of the API, how do we use it in a program? Here we go. First step is to load the API, called button. Okay, so the name of the program that all this information is called button. And that's all the functions and stuff in here. So if we want to reference the setTable command, for example, we need to call it by calling the API first, button, then a period, and then the function inside that API that we want to call. So right now we're calling button.setTable. So we're calling the setTable function inside the button API. Okay, this is the same way you do like turtle.forward. Turtle is the API and the function is forward. So you're doing turtle.forward, it's calling the forward function from within the turtle API. Same basic concept. Okay, so we want to fill out the table and we want to say create a button called test1, which calls the test1 function at 10:20:35. So this is the 10 to 20 on the X and 3 to 5 on the Y. Okay, and the same thing for 2, 3, and 4. A function called getClick, which will go ahead and wait for somebody to click on the monitor, and then send the checkXY button function the X and Y coordinates of where they clicked. And then it's real simple from there. Any code that you want to have inside your button. So remember I told you that the second piece of information here is the name of the function that's getting called. So here's the test1 function. So when you click on the test1 button, it calls the test1 function because of this line right here. And you get button.flash test1. So in this case, I set it up so that when you click on test1, it flashes the button and then prints out to the computer screen, not on the monitor, but on the computer screen, the words test1. Test2 demonstrates that toggle button functionality where it calls the toggle button. It just switches it from red to green, and then if you click it again, it'll switch from green to red. It just toggles the state of whatever the button is in. And again, it prints test2. Test3 and 4 don't do anything fancier than printing test3 and test4. The main meat of the program here is first run the fill table command. That's what actually sets all the variables up and sets up the buttons. And then the button.screen writes it all out to the screen. Then button.heading, so we write out a heading on the program. And then the button label. I said put it at X1, Y5, write the word demo. X1, Y5, write the word demo. Nice and easy. And while true, do getClick. So it's just going to sit here and wait for somebody to click on the monitor. When they click on the monitor, it's going to check if they clicked on a button somewhere. If they did, it'll execute the function. Let's give it a shot. Demo, please. Cool. So we've got this nifty little thing. Remember, I told you that when you click on test1, it's going to flash the button, which it did real quick, and write the word test1 to the program. Right-click on test2, and it's just going to toggle the button. It's going to change it from red to green. And it writes out test2. Click it again, and it'll toggle it off, and write out test2 again. And then 3 and 4 don't have any toggles or have any flashes, but they do write out the words test 3 and 4 to the computer. So that's the button API. Probably didn't do a great job of explaining it, but I did my best. It's a little complex of a program, definitely more complex than some of the other programs I've written, and again, not the best program ever written out there. So hopefully you at least know how to use the button API at this point. For your functions, you can go ahead and, tell them basically, you can have them do whatever you want. A lot of times you'll see me manipulating redstone or, doing some kind of complex function inside those so that when I click on a button, something happens, like emit a redstone signal or whatever you want. So that's all pretty much basic computer craft stuff once you've gotten beyond what you've seen so far. So for now, Direwolf20 signing off on the button API tutorial. Hope you guys enjoyed checking it out. I'll go ahead and paste bin the demo program for you. Paste bin put demo, so you can go ahead and play with the demo program a little bit, get a feel for how it works. Hopefully that'll help you out. I'll also paste bin put the array program, just so you can mess around with those two-dimensional arrays if you're so inclined. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and take it easy.